This is a test. This is a test. This is an interview for the Clark County Historical Society by Roland Matthies, interviewing Don Wiegel, who has had a lifelong experience in Springfield, and most of his career was associated with banking. And it's our purpose to get from him, for posterity, all of the information we possibly can about his background and about the banking industry in Clark County. So Don, tell us a little bit about how you got started in life. Who brought you here?
Well, I was born in Tremont City in 1906, and I've spent all my life in Clark County. I left Springfield to go to school. I attended Miami University. I went to Dayton and was associated with the Third National at one time. And then I went to Cincinnati and was the president of the Norwood Hyde Park Bank and Trust Company for 2 years before I came back to Springfield and relocated with the Springfield Savings Society.
Now that was about what year?
54 and 55.
Mm-hmm.
Now the Savings Society was founded in 1873 as a mutual savings bank, and was located in several locations, originally on Limestone Street, North Limestone Street, and then on East Main Street, east of the Bushnell Building. In 1917, a new building was built across from the Home Store Building, or the Bushnell Building, and the bank was in that location until the new building was built, and they moved to the corner of Main and Fountain Avenue in 1961.
Mm-hmm. When you first started out here, what banks were at the corner of Main and Fountain?
The American Trust and Savings Bank.
And that disappeared about when? In the Depression?
Well, I think it's about 1929, 1930.
Uh-huh. By merger.
Well, by merger, yes. They merged with the First National Bank, which was located on the ground floor of the Bushnell Building.
Now, the Bushnell Building is where Ren's store was.
That's right. And the Farmers Bank, those three banks, either 28 or 29 merged. The Farmers Bank was located on High Street between Fountain and Limestone. And then a year later, they merged with the Mad River Bank, or the Mad River Bank merged with them and came over to the corner. So there were four banks located now where the First National Bank or Bank of Ohio office is located.
Mm-hmm.
Lagunda Bank was on the other corner, the northeast corner, and the Citizens Bank was on Limestone Street between Main and High. The Morris Plan Bank was east of High Street on Limestone Street, and the Commercial Bank was on the corner of High and Limestone Street and the Mitchell Building.
So let's count them up now. How many were there at that time?
Well, There was the Savings Society,
Right.
the American Trust,
Yeah.
First National,
Yeah.
Laguna National, Citizens Bank, Mad River National, Springfield National, later the Commercial Bank, Farmers Bank, Morris Plan Bank, then there was a bank at South Vienna, a bank at New Carlisle, and a bank at South Charleston.
So we actually, in Springfield, we had 9 commercial banks. Did you consider the Morris Plan Bank a commercial bank?
Well, it was a small loan bank at that time. They operated almost like a finance company. However, they were chartered. Well, I think it was a state charter that provided that they could take deposits.
Mm-hmm. Now, at the time you had 9 commercial banks, let's say, there were also how many savings and loans?
The M&M, the Springfield Federal, Home City, and then there was a building loan in New Carlisle, so there were 4 building loans. Countywide. Countywide, there were 12 banks and 4 building loans.
Now, were any of these banks influenced by out-of-town money?
No,
They were all locally owned.
all locally owned, yeah.
I think that's marvelous. And a good deal like the local industry was at that time.
That's right.
There weren't any mergers from outside money. Which one of the banks at that time was the largest?
The First National Bank, I think, was the largest. In 1906, I was just checking here, in 1906, the First National total assets was $1,800,000 plus. That was the largest commercial bank. The Savings Society at that time had slightly over $2 million in total assets.
Mm-hmm.
But it was strictly a savings bank, no, just savings accounts only.
Oh, it did not make loans?
Make mortgage loans.
Mortgage loans. But no commercial loans?
No commercial.
Mm-hmm. Who was or who were some of the presidents that you can remember at that time?
Well, at the Savings Society, when I had first worked for the First National Bank, and then I went to Dayton and came back to Springfield and went with the Savings Society.
And what year was that?
That was in 32.
Right after the bottom dropped out.
Mr. Edward Hartford was the president.
Hartford.
Yeah.
Was he brought into town from outside, or was he native?
No, he was a native here.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Freeman, I believe, was president of the American Trust. He came here from Cleveland. Mr. Cartmel was president of the, J.B. Cartmel was president of the First National. He was a native. Laguna Bank, J. Warren Kiefer, the general, native. He was president. Citizens Bank, Frank Hosterman, native. Mad River Bank, Harry Hebrank, came from Pittsburgh. Commercial Bank, a gentleman by the name of Al Best, and he was a former bank examiner. Farmers Bank, Robert Feldy, and he came from Pittsburgh. Organized the Farmers Bank here. Morris Plan, Ralph Hollenbeck was the president.
That's the father of
Yes.
Dwight?
Yeah. South Vienna, Mr. Saylor was president. New Carlisle, Mr. Black was president. And South Charleston, Mr. Houston, or Mr. Titus, I don't know which one exactly was president. That bank failed over there. It was reorganized later. And they brought in a bank examiner by the name of Mr. Hamner that operated that bank until it was purchased by the Springfield Savings Society.
Mm-hmm. What year was the Savings Society's building built that we remember on Main Street? During your administration?
You mean on the corner?
No, the one that looked like a bank building.
Oh.
The old-fashioned bank building.
No, that was 1917.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And then the new one was built when?
We went in there in 61.
You were president then?
Yeah.
And when did you retire?
71. I was president 28th year.
Mm-hmm. What sort of changes took place in your own bank that you think were something that was significant, such as number of employees, the kind of who kept the books and how you kept the books?
Well, the Savings Society, as I mentioned, was a mutual savings bank, and we were permitted by law to purchase stock in a commercial bank or in banks if it was approved by the superintendent of banks. So we purchased the bank stock at South Charleston. So we owned that as an investment. We didn't operate it. And then later we organized a commercial bank here in Springfield and ran it in connection in the same banking room as the society. We capitalized that, and that was an investment.
What was the name of that bank?
The Springfield the Springfield Savings Society Commercial Bank.
Springfield Savings Society Commercial Bank. Boy, that's a knocker, isn't it?
We bobtailed that a little bit. It was the Savings Society Commercial Bank for advertising.
Now, by commercial, you mean that you made business loans?
No, the checking account.
Mm-hmm.
And then later we used the bank charter from South Charleston and organized or used that and changed the name to the Springfield Bank. So we merged that with the Savings Society Commercial Bank, and we took over the Savings Society and liquidated that. So we had actually three banks merged.
Mm-hmm. When you were still in the old building, about how many employees did you have?
Well, I think about 25 to...
And most all the machine work was by hand, the adding machines and so on?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that finally went up to, I think, around 150 after we merged those three banks and operated on the corner. We operated there until 65. And at that time, we sold the bank. And the investment company that bought the bank in turn sold it to Society Savings Bank in Cleveland.
Oh, there was an intermediary, huh? I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Who was the investment company?
Continental. First Continental.
Chicago?
No. That isn't right. First Continental. It's in New York.
Oh. I knew there was a Continental.
Transcontinental.
Transcontinental.
There's Transcontinental.
Uh-huh. And then they sold it to Savings Society in Cleveland.
Yeah. Savings Society in Cleveland originally was a savings bank, and they converted to a commercial bank. And of course, as you know today, it's a nationally known holding company.
Yeah. your depositors back in the pre-Depression days were probably largely farmers.
Well, no, it was a mix. The accounts were all savings accounts, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Small savings, school savings, Christmas savings. And it was very unusual to have a balance on a savings account over $10,000.
Oh. Of course, there was no insurance for the accounts in those days.
Oh, yeah. We had insurance after the Banking Act of 35.
Mm-hmm. But before that, there wasn't.
No.
Did any of our banks go broke?
No, the commercial, the Springfield Bank, I get confused here a little bit. The Springfield Bank in the Mitchell building went broke.
About when?
Well, I think it was during the bank holiday.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, not during the bank holiday, prior to the bank holiday. Okay. It was the Springfield Commercial Bank, and they failed. Mr. Feldy, who organized the Farmers Bank here, after the merger, moved out of the First National Bank and Trust Company and bought the commercial bank, and he was the owner of that bank when it failed.
Mm-hmm. Did he take a lot of depositors with him?
I don't think it was too great. There was some loss there.
Mm-hmm.
But as I remember, it paid about 75 cents on the dollar. It took about 3 years to do that. There were 7 or 8 dividends during the liquidation. I think it was about 75 cents.
At the time of the bank holiday, you were in what capacity at the bank?
I was the assistant secretary.
Mm-hmm. Was there any kind of a run on a bank at that time in our local banks?
No, I was in Dayton when they during the bank holiday.
I see. You hadn't come here yet.
No, I'd been here, but I went to Dayton.
Yes.
When I was in Dayton at Third National, prior to the holiday, we had a big run on Third National. It lasted a full day.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have one deposit during the day. Nothing but withdrawals all day.
Are you aware as to whether we had one here or any kind of a run?
I don't think so. I think there was a lot of withdrawing, but I don't think there was a line-up run.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think they might call it a drain.
As you look back on your experience and on the knowledge you gained, who would you say is a standout banker of Clark County of the pre-Depression days? Harry Freeman, was he it?
Well, I think L.H. Cook was the most popular banker. Now, he was president of the Savings Society. He had been with the First National Bank on Main Street, and he came down from Cleveland. He and Mr. Freeman came to Springfield together when they were young men. And Mr. Cook went to the First National, and Harry Freeman went to the American Trust. And they were junior officers when they started here. And L.H. Cook then, after the merger, he was the cashier of the merged bank. And after that, he went to the Savings Society. And he really took that off the ground. It was a small institution that during the Depression years and 10 years following that, moved out of the rest of the banks in Springfield.
Mm-hmm. Well, now
Very, very, very popular man, but not too active in civic affairs. He was strictly a banker.
Now, Harry Freeman wound up with
Huntington.
Huntington, didn't he?
Yeah. He left after the merger.
And went with Lagana.
Mm-hmm. And then they, at that time, took in the Citizens Bank. There was a merger there, too.
Hmm.
And he was president, I guess, until he died. And Bruce Merritt took over. Remember?
Yes. Yeah. Retired dentist. Mm-hmm. I recall in the days when Dr. Stoughton and I were making campaigns here in Springfield, we'd always go to the banks, and they would act together in making any kind of a pledge to a capital campaign in Springfield. I guess it was based on the clearinghouse.
Mm-hmm. It was really based on totals.
Yeah. And it was a very cordial arrangement, I think.
The banks paid according to their percentage of total assets.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had 10% of the assets in Springfield, you paid in 10% of that total pledge.
Mm-hmm. I think it worked out beautifully. I don't imagine it's still in effect.
I don't think so.
No. Competition's too rough now.
Yeah. Well, even ahead of that, there was a clearinghouse association here, and the banks had an office where they went every morning and exchanged the checks.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Where was this?
It was in the basement of the Mad River Bank. So you went over every morning. You exchanged checks with your neighbors. Yeah.
What years were that?
Well, that was back before the bank holiday. Back in the.
Was this common practice throughout the country?
Oh, yeah.
Or were we just behind the times?
And they pretty much made all the rules too. It was organized. They had a president each year and officers, and I think interest rates were pretty much established at that time. The commercial banks really weren't interested in savings, and it was a sideline, so it didn't make much difference. Everybody paid 4%. That was it.
Well, if you came into the clearinghouse in the morning with an out-of-town check, what would you do with that?
Well, the out-of-town checks went to your correspondent bank.
By mail or messenger or what?
Mail.
Is that right?
No. All the checks that came to our bank that went northern part of the state, went to Cleveland. We had a bank account, correspondent bank, Cleveland. Everything that went out of state east went to New York. Everything that went central Ohio went to Columbus. And all the checks that went to west of Ohio and the southern part of Ohio went to Cincinnati. So we had a bank letter every day going out. And then we had letters coming in from those banks every day with our checks.
By letter meaning what? A cover letter?
Mail. Just a package of mail.
Well, who got the advantage of the float? There'd be 3 days, let's say, between the time you took a check in at Springfield Savings and it got cleared in Cleveland. Who got the advantage of that float?
Well, we took credit for it the day it came in.
You did?
Yeah. On our books, we got credit the next day at our correspondent bank.
The next day?
The next day. They didn't bother about clearing all those checks. They just gave us credit. We could draw on our account whether they were collected or not.
Yeah. That was a trusting society, wasn't it? Yeah. Banking in those days was a lot of fun, I imagine, compared to dog eat dog that it is today.
Well, you had a fixed spread, and your expenses were almost fixed for a year. You knew exactly. Your interest rates were established for a year. Your loan rates were established for a year. You didn't change every month.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't change every quarter either.
Now, practically all of our banks were state banks, or were they national?
Well, Morris Plan was state, the Farmers national. Donald was national. About 7 national banks.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of them state.
Yours was a state bank. Mm-hmm.
Special charter.
What was the distinction in those days? What did it amount to?
Well, there were only 3 mutual savings banks in the state of Ohio, and they came here during the Western Reserve movement that came from New England into northeastern Ohio, Cleveland area.
Yeah.
And the Society for Savings was the first mutual savings bank in the state. This bank in Springfield was the second, and then there was one, Marietta Dime Savings Bank. And later, the savings and loan charter was more attractive. It was more flexible, and no one was interested in establishing a mutual savings bank. And the state of Ohio did not have any laws that provided for mutual savings banks. So the legislature approved these 3 charters.
Mm-hmm.
You had to go over there to get approval. And the state banking law at that time was what we were supposed to follow, but there were so many things in there that didn't pertain at all to savings banks. And a lot of the answers weren't in there, so we used the state code until we had a problem. Then we went to the superintendent of banks, and under the Administrative Procedure Act in the state of Ohio, he was permitted to make a decision which was considered law. So he really wrote the law for the savings banks.
Mm-hmm.
Most of it.
Now, what was the difference between a savings and loan and a mutual savings bank?
Well, in theory, really, there wasn't much.
The depositors really owned it.
Yeah. It was in the establishment, I mean the capitalization of it. The Mutual Savings Bank in Springfield, when it was established, there were 20 men that put up $5,000 apiece. And they were permitted to, in fact not permitted, they had to leave that money in the organization until enough capital was built up so that they could take it out.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened, they could take their $5,000 out, and they had to take it out and receive the going rate of interest that was paid to depositors over the period of time that it was held there. So there wasn't really any advantage on the part of anybody to want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Savings banks, or the commercial banks at that time, were beginning to accept savings deposits, so there wasn't any need for other banks to be established to take deposits. By the time the savings bank was established, there wasn't anybody interested in deposits. And the building loans, they became interested in. It was pretty much sponsored by the real estate people because it was a source of funds for mortgages.
Well, if a bank was not interested in deposits, where did it get its money to make loans? From
Commercial deposits.
From commercial deposits and from stock sales, huh? Huh. So the individual depositor didn't mean much to the bank.
Well, there were some CDs, but there weren't very many people that had $5,000 just to lay off. And when I first started at the First National, I know they didn't have any savings passbooks. They had CDs. American Trust and not very many of those. When I was in Dayton, just before the bank holiday, they had a small savings department and a few CDs. Commercial banks stayed in commercial field.
Out of the savings and loans, M&M has been the largest, or was it pretty steadily? Huh?
I think from the very beginning.
Too bad we missed getting Eddie Lomas on tape, because he knew a lot about the savings society, and Raleigh Smith, we missed him too.
Well, of course, Ed was in the commercial business before he went over there.
Oh, was he? Oh, there. I got it. Testing, all right.
According to records, on July 15th, 1901, the loans and discounts at the First National Bank totaled $1,135,200. Deposits subject to check at the First National Bank, $1,020,900. At the Mad River Bank, loans and discounts, $504,900.
$504,000.
$504,900. Deposits, $448,800. Lagonda Bank, loans and discounts, $303,000. Deposits subject to check, $360,900. Springfield National Bank, $243,700 in loans and discounts. Deposits, $208,800. Citizens National, loans and discounts, $361,700. Deposits subject to check, $421,200. Now the total of all those banks in 1901 was $2,548,500 in loans. Total deposits, $2,460,600.
Very interesting.
The number of depositors in national banks, 5,000. Depositors in savings banks, 9,808, all in the Savings Society. Depositors in building loans, total, 6,100.
6,100. Yeah. You're reading this from what book, John?
Here's the booklet that was put out by the Society. 100-year. Have that book in case you don't have it.
Called The Heart of Springfield.
Yeah.
I'm sure the Historical Society would like to have that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this was the 100th anniversary of the Savings Society. And it's not only banks, but there's a lot of other information regarding that.
You also referred to this little book which you showed me called The Directory of the City of Springfield, and it is time-worn. It's full of interesting information, including a city map, and it's dated 1852. And I plead with you, if you ever dispose of this, to be sure that the Historical Society gets it. Were there any so-called scandals in the banking of Clark County?
Turn it off.
No. I think we ought to have on the record anything that was published that was.
Well, I'm not sure what I say is something that was published.
I see. Well. Oh, shoot.
I can tell you after the interview.
Yes. I recall that when I came here in 1943, I think, this has nothing to do with scandals, Dr. Reese Edgar Tullis had just left the presidency of First National Bank and become the chairman, while at the same time being president of Wittenberg. While not a scandal, this was something that was frowned upon by the educational authorities, and they persuaded Dr. Tullis to become chairman of the board instead. Knowing him, I'll bet he continued to run the bank.
Well, I'm pretty sure he was there about every day. He came down at noon, I think.
Yeah, I served under him for 6 years at Wittenberg. My initial
I
6.
was at the First National Bank when he was president there.
Oh, you were there at that time. Uh-huh. Don Bishop came on the scene considerably later.
Yeah, probably
Roy,
10, 12 years later.
and Roy Clark was in between.
Uh,
I liked Roy Clark. I thought he was a typical president.
I was there when Bank Ohio bought First National.
Were you?
Yeah. And the first, it was the first purchase of the bank outside of Columbus.
Uh-huh.
This was their first.
Had Huntington come in before that? That was after. And Savings Society had not come in either. So it really was the first of any bank in Clark County going abroad, let's say.
That's right.
Yeah. I imagine it was pretty hard to swallow.
Well, yes, there were a lot of loans called. I think probably, maybe they needed to be called, I don't know. But Mr. Freeman had moved out after the merger to the London Bank, and a lot of the business went over there following him after Bank of America came in.
He was a very popular person, wasn't he? He was busy in the community. Yeah. Yeah. Where did the Shevlins do their banking? One of the big families of Springfield.
Well, P.J. Shevlin was on the First National Board at one time.
I see.
I think he was on the board when I was there.
Uh-huh. I imagine some of the big old families of Springfield carried a big clout with the bankers to get their accounts. They were probably entertained a good deal. Which bank do you think, in trying to be unbiased about it, deserved by its citizenship the affection of Clark County people? Which bank do you think really was interested in the community?
Well, I think that depends on which segment of the community you're talking about. The commercial banks naturally played up to business and industry. The savings banks and savings and loans played up to the individuals and had more contacts by number than the commercial banks. And because of the individual accounts, they were better known and goodness, we had almost 60,000 accounts when we counted all our school savings and our Christmas savings and our small savings and our checking accounts at the Society Bank.
It seems to me that in the 48 years that I've been here, as I looked at the leaders of the community, I think of you, I think of Roy Clark, I think of Eddie Lonis. Well, Mr. Freeman I didn't know very well, but he certainly was a leader in his day.
He can be included, yeah.
Yeah. And the bankers of today, who are really nothing more than district superintendents, I think, to the home office in Cleveland or Columbus or Dayton, just don't seem to get as involved with it. And oftentimes they're not here long enough.
That's right.
But I see what's happened to the trust departments, and security's the only one that's got one that really amounts to anything.
Well, first the First National had a trust department, and they moved it out. Society had one, and they moved it out.
Huntington's moved theirs out.
Yeah. So the bank that stayed is doing the business.
Yeah.
And should.
Right. And I think they're doing a very ethical job.
Oh, they're a tremendous job, I think.
Yeah.
Remarkable. It really is.
Mm-hmm. I have a high regard for the personnel over there.
Oh, I do too.
Including my son.
Yeah. Harry Egger.
Yeah.
Harry worked for us, you know.
Did he?
We had, I think I told you the other day, we had out of our little bank there on East Main Street, 5 people that became bank presidents.
No, you didn't tell me that. 5 people?
5 people.
Who?
Well, I came up through that bank, so I'm one of them. Don Bishop.
Yeah.
Harry Egger.
Now, Harry worked for you.
Yeah. And Bill Ruth, the president over at Portsmouth, Star Bank, and Ray Lang, 5 of us.
Ray Lang. Yeah.
He was president. We sent him to South Charleston as president of that bank. But,
Now, what did Ruth do here? I've forgotten.
he was executive vice president after Don Bishop left, went over to take the presidency of the First National.
Now, he left town quite a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he left when Cleveland came in.
Now, Bill Lambacher succeeded you? Yeah. There have been a couple since, haven't there?
No, only one.
Just one? Looking at the business life of Springfield, and we're trying to get on the record opinions about who you considered the leaders of the community to have been. We mentioned those of the banks. I think of when I came here, Joe Shevlin was probably one of the number one fellows. Harris Miller was very prominent. You had some names of people that have been prominent.
Well, of course, I think Stoughton has been considered a builder.
Yes.
Paul Deere certainly was.
Well, what bank was he in? Yeah.
He was the director of our bank.
I see. He was a great fellow.
Yes, he was.
He had a wonderful son-in-law. Yeah. Well, the family of that ran Springfield Machine Montanus.
Montanus.
Where were they? What bank were they in?
Uganda.
Uganda. Who were the customary attorneys for banks? The big one?
Well, Martin and Corey, that was
Yeah.
the First Nationals law firm.
Bill Bailey was tied into one, wasn't he, with Pettigrew's? No.
Anderson, McKee, and Schwer.
Oh,
Eminem.
yeah. George Schwer, yeah. McKee, yeah, I can recall him.
Yeah.
I didn't know
I
that.
don't know who was the head of Rush.
Ken Rush was Springfield Federal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Home City, I don't know.
Frank Nevius.
Yeah. And Security Bank.
Cole and Cole were our attorneys.
Uh-huh.
Art Todd was represented the Uganda Bank.
Art Todd and George Smith, remember?
Yeah.
I started playing bridge with them years and years ago, and Ray Kruger.
Yeah.
And the suckers would get me for 20th of a cent a point, you know. There's nothing to that, you know. And of course, I was practically nothing in the way of salary.
Did they play on Wednesday afternoon up in the office?
No, we played around various homes. We'd come in, cut the decks, no discussion of the weather. We'd just sit down and play bridge. George was a character.
Yeah. He was a good attorney, too.
Oh, you bet he was. Yeah. I see you have been to the new headquarters of Martin Brown.
No, I haven't.
You haven't?
No.
It's quite a place.
Yes, I know.
Quite a place. And it involves quite an expenditure, I understand. Yeah.
What about the rest of the building?
Yeah, I was just going to say, what do you think the future is for that building?
What's the future for the Wren's building?
It looks to me like absolute zero. I don't see a thing happening. Certainly the Chamber of Commerce has tried, from all I can tell.
I thought maybe Clark State might grow enough that they'd need more space.
Yeah.
But I doubt whether their universities are interested in old buildings. I think
Right.
you have to have modern buildings. It's too expensive to conform to all the building regulations.
Yeah. The competition, you've got to have modern quarters. Yeah. What was the situation with regard to the railroads that went through Springfield and their relationship to the banks? Did they mean anything to the banks?
Oh, yes.
Did you get deposits from them?
Yes, we'd get daily deposits. I can remember even the old traction company, the C&LE that came up from Cincinnati, and this was a terminal here, you know. They cut here and went to Columbus and then went north to Toledo. And this was their deposit. All the deposits came in to this office here. They had a big office here on the corner of
the old Albers building?
Yeah. They had about 60 people working there.
Is that right?
And these deposits were made locally, but the railroads pulled down, I think, only once a month. maybe once a week, I forgot.
Hmm.
We had that deposit more than overnight.
Mhm.
Everybody pulls down overnight. Now they sweep it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, they call it a sweep.
Sweep, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. And the railroads, actually, our cash all came in by mail. It was shipped up here, Cincinnati.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, we'd go to the post office and pick it up. And we would bring in cash for the weekends, and then we would ship out on Mondays. We had too much cash. We would ship out.
But there it sat over the weekend,
Yeah.
not earning anything.
No.
What was the usual amount of cash that somebody would carry over to your office without a guard?
Oh, I suppose $10,000. I don't know. At one time, there was a robbery down at the post office. Cliff Davis and his partner were held up coming out of the post office, and I think that was $50,000.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Huh? I've never heard of that one.
Yeah.
Cliff Davis, I haven't thought of him in a long time. Is he still living?
Yeah.
The traction company was really kind of a big business
Oh,
for a
it was
while,
a big
wasn't it?
business, yeah.
I recall when I was at DePaul University from 27 to 31, it went from Indianapolis to Terre Haute through Greencastle. Then it'd get out in Bloomington and go up to Crawfordsville. And
Well, of course, Cincinnati and north, it came up through Hamilton. It didn't go to Middletown, Hamilton, Dayton, Springfield. And then this was a terminal. They divided here and went to Columbus and Toledo.
did they haul freight?
No.
No.
There was maybe a little baggage compartment.
Yeah.
No passenger.
How many railroads did we have at that time?
Well, we had the Erie and the Pennsylvania and the Big Four.
Where was the Erie?
It came, you know where Maitland is?
Yeah.
Out off of 41. It came through there and went on south. It didn't come into town. They had a spur. They came in. In fact, I think most of the shipping that Kroll did might have gone out to Maitland. I'm not sure. I think the spur came in. The Springfield Suburban, you remember the Springfield Suburban Railroad?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that was part of the Erie, the old Erie track that came in the town as a spur.
Speaking of Kroll Collier, did that mean much to the banks?
Oh, yeah. The First National had that deposit. And all the subscription payments came through here.
Oh.
Stacks of checks.
Ooh. Is that right?
And, of course, all the mail went through this post office going out, too. So the post office was a big customer. They bypassed the post office. The post office had a baggage or a postal depot, they called it, over at the station. And the trucks with the magazines came down and went through that station. Didn't go through, it was part of the station, but it was a branch.
It's just pitiful the way that thing closed up.
Yeah.
What about International Harvester? Did they actually do banking here?
Very little. Payrolls. But strictly a payroll. I don't think they did any. Maybe some petty accounts. Very low. No, they would send the deposit in to cover the checks written each week.
Who were the biggest commercial depositors in your time?
Well, I expect the Kroll ones.
Kroll. Yeah, I would think so. Steel
Because
products.
there are a lot of even local companies, locally owned, that didn't do all their banking in Springfield. Back then, for instance, well, I won't name the Shovlins, but some company that size, I'm sure, would borrow money outside of Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell by the figures that there wasn't enough to take care of the credit.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant that some of their deposit was taken out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think National Supply account, had it all been here, would have been probably as large as a Kroll, I don't know.
Is that so? That big, huh?
They were big.
Yeah. Were Chevlins in that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about steel products? Was that New Carlisle?
No, that actually came up here out of Dayton. Mr. McAdams had a shop in Dayton. That wasn't very big when it started. This just kind of grew up. It was, maybe 200 people
Mm-hmm.
for quite a while before.
What was the name of the man who was president, who was such a popular citizen?
Steel products.
Yeah.
McAdams. Joe McAdams. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, he was.
Well, his son-in-law was in
There you go. Big fella. Yeah. Dr. Stoughton tried to get McAdams interested in making a large gift to Wittenberg. He and I were even invited out to the ranch in Arizona. Not much came of it. I can't think of his name either, Don. He was a big athletic type fellow.
Yeah. He was on the rowing team at Annapolis.
Yeah. But the local president, they lived, I think I'm thinking the right person, they lived in the gray house on the northwest corner of McCright and Fountain Boulevard. Northwest corner, yeah. The house is still there. Mac something? Well, not important. Well, what else would you like to add before we wind up?
You asked me.
It's been very interesting, I tell you.
Well, it's kind of mixed up, but this girl can kind of...
We'll get it down on paper, and then you'll get a chance to edit.
Okay, yeah. Let's do it. Then I can add something to that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll help.
So as we conclude this interview, I say my thanks to Don and give recognition to his long leadership in this community and wish him well in his long retirement as I am enjoying my long retirement. It's great to be alive, isn't it, Don?
Every day.
Thank you very much.
Okay.